All right, thank you everybody for coming to the Mad City BECC meeting. I'm Chris Schultz-Beekner, one of our committee members. I work at WEC. I'm a Director of Marketing and Corporate Communications there. I just wanted to introduce, if Letitia, Terry, Ingo, and Kathy could just stand up for a second. They're like, why am I standing? This is the committee group. These are when I say, you know, Chris and the committee, this is the committee that's putting the meetings together and coming up with ideas. So if you like what you're seeing, let us know. If you want different things for the meetings, let us know. We've been trying to come up with ideas and planning, so let us know what you're liking and what you're not. And I lost my thing again here. So what we're doing today is we're doing a mock mini National BECC meeting. We have 5 people that are here today that are actually going to be presenting next week at the National BECC Conference in DC. And so what we thought would be good is to give them an opportunity to do their presentation before next week, so kind of a dry run through. Technically at the sessions there are usually 3 ways that you do a presentation at National. There's usually a panel of maybe 3 or 4 people that do a 15 to 20-minute presentation and then questions. There's the lightning round where you have about, as Kim puts it, she's like, I have like 5 minutes. She's got 5 minutes, and there's usually like 7 to 10 people on the panel. 5 minutes to do your presentation. At the end there might be 4 or 5 questions for the whole group. And then there's the poster session, which is usually at night or during lunch, where people stand with a poster that they have, and people walk by, talk to them, get information. We're lucky enough to have all of those here today. So we're going to do it just a little bit different than the National. The people that are doing the lightning rounds and have the 5 minutes, I'm going to let people ask more questions than they'd normally get to, just to give them an idea of the type of questions they may get. And then Ingo is doing a poster, so when we get to the end, Ingo's going to come up, do just a brief presentation on what his poster's about, and then when we have time for networking, you can come up and actually ask him some more questions. So just a little bit different than what you'd see at National, but a good opportunity to let people do their dry run and you to see what's going to be happening out there.
Good morning, I'm Tom Searing. I'm with Franklin Energy Services. Franklin designs and implements energy efficiency programming for utilities in 15 states right now. And I'm going to talk to you today about how to integrate some of these behavioral concepts into existing programming. I've gotten to do a couple of pilot projects at Franklin and elsewhere. And without further ado, because this is a lightning presentation, I'm going to talk very briefly about 3 of these concepts and then go a little more into depth into 2 of the concepts. So most of us are familiar with the idea of social norms, and my brief thoughts on what the social norms mean is that everybody is doing this. And that's very brief. There's so much richness here that has to be explored yet in what we can do with this message. But I'm not going to talk more about that today. Cognitive dissonance is the idea that people want to act consistently with their own beliefs or with the actions of other people that they either like or respect. And to me, this is like a sales tool for field people that are working in energy efficiency. If they learn something about what the customer in front of them, then they get to say, well, you know, green-minded folks are doing this, or people who are very cost-conscious are doing this, or people who are really concerned about lowering their maintenance costs and their maintenance activity are doing this, and using that as a sales tool in the field. There's a concept called certainty bias and a related concept called pseudo-certainty bias. And what that means is when people think that their actions are going to result in a certain outcome, they're more likely to act in that fashion. It's kind of like a conservative bias towards protecting, you know, what they have or whatever. And this is a great tool to be used in the area of like renewable energy, where there's a fixed cost up front, and afterwards there's like a known stream of benefits in the future. I think there's a lot of kind of hay to be made using certainty bias in programming. We'll get to the next 2 concepts are ones where we're going to go a little more in depth. So choice overload is when people are faced with a large set of options for how to proceed, they often do nothing. And this has definite ramifications for the energy efficiency field, where we tend to give people 35 ways that they can save energy, and what do they end up doing? Most of the time, they do nothing. And then there's the concept of loss aversion, in that people feel pain of loss in a much stronger way than they feel kind of the joy or pleasure from gains. And we can use that too. So here's my representative customer that's just received an energy efficiency assessment on his building, and he's got a report, and there's a nice table which lays out 15 options for him to consider to improve energy efficiency in his building. And he may not be grabbing his head, but inside, this certainly could be happening, because what does happen more often than not, more than 50% of the cases, people who get an energy assessment install none of the measures. They don't take any action. So what's the proposed solution is to focus the customer's attention on maybe their best option for energy savings, or possibly maybe a top 3 recommendations list. So we go through and we find all kinds of opportunities, like you can in any building, for improving efficiency, but we want to put the information for the best possible 1 to 3 options up front. And we did this at Franklin Energy for our client, Excel Energy in Minnesota. They were doing commercial energy assessments, so we did a randomized controlled study. As the request for assessments came in, they simply went into 1 of 2 groups. And the first group, when they got their energy assessment, got a cover letter, and they got kind of a pitch saying, these are your best options for energy savings. The second group got a cover letter, which was standard to the program at the time, which said, thanks for having us in. It was great to meet you. Please see the attached report for options to save energy. And we measured the number of installed measures and the savings that came out. And what we found was that the group that was given the limited options installed more measures and got more savings. So we're actually taking the cover letters for a number of our assessment programs right now, and we're changing them to reflect these results. So I don't know if you've ever seen a graph like this before. So this is my version of, we're changing to loss aversion now, obviously. This is my version of Kahneman and Tversky's S-shaped value curve, showing that people feel the pain of a loss. Let's see if I can get this to work. More than the pleasure of a gain. So if we go over here and say people get $10,000, they feel about this much pleasure from doing that. But if we go over here and they lose $10,000, they feel maybe twice as much pain from doing that. So how do we use this in the energy efficiency field? And when I was at GDS Associates a few years ago, they were running the Programming for Focus on Energy Agriculture program. So I can't remember what year it was, but in the previous year, there had been like 900 assessments done on dairy farms. And what do you know? Most of these folks had not installed any of the recommended measures. So I designed a follow-up marketing campaign where we sent letters to all these folks, and we had 3 groups. We had a control group that we did nothing with, and we had a group that got a letter saying that right at the top in big, bold print, that you could be losing a certain amount of money each year that you do not have this energy efficiency measure. So this was the loss message. The other group got a letter with big, bold type at the top that said, you could save so much per year by installing whatever the efficiency measure was. They were custom recommendations, so everybody got a different one. And we also did get some results here. Unfortunately, unlike the prediction of the brilliant graduate student, the results here were that the save language worked better than the loss language with these dairy farmers. This was in 2010. And I mean, I could wave my hands and say there were all kinds of things going on for dairy farms in 2010 that might have influenced this, but the result was the loss message was not more effective. So I'm going to leave you with a final thought, in that no one told these students at the University of Wisconsin football game to wear red, right? And no one told them to clap their hands like this when the opposing team was introduced. They just did it because everybody else was doing it. And there's a lot of energy savings to be made by using social norms to get people to take action. That's what I've got.
Good morning, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Seth Novak. I'm an analyst in the utility, state, and local research program at ACEEE. And So ACEEE is in DC. I live in Madison, and so I work from my home office. And my focus area is on utility, gas, and electric energy efficiency programs that are either exemplary or innovative. And so a lot of my research is finding out what works. And what I'm kind of starting with today is some research we did a couple years ago, or published in beginning of 2013, on next generation programs, that is, frontiers of energy efficiency. And in that paper, we looked at all these different areas of utility programs. So it wasn't just about small business programs. It was also residential lighting and industrial programs. And I think there were 22 different categories we looked at. But one of the areas that I focused on for that was small business. And we're talking about very small business, like 1 to 200 kW electric users. So like a small restaurant or an office or something of that nature. And what I want everyone to be left with today, above all else, is that, from that research, we came up with what are the barriers to participation in these programs, and found examples of energy efficiency programs at utilities that were successfully overcoming those barriers. But the magic special sauce, the thing that really worked, that was sort of behind the scenes in all of this, was the degree to which the design of the program and the communications and the marketing of the program kind of reached out to the business owner in a way that they said, oh, this is something for me. And it's really interesting you're talking, Tom, about social norms, because we've actually seen examples where there will be a targeted community. And like I think ComEd did this in a small town in Illinois. They went in and just did an intensive effort to communicate with most of the small businesses in that area. And not only did they do a lot of audits, but the take-up rate, the number of people that actually participated, was like exponentially higher than you would have expected if it wasn't just about that main street on that community. This is the kind of thing that comes up again and again. So those are the takeaways. Again, 2 pieces. Well-designed program that helps the people overcome the barriers, and having that experience of this is for me. It's more than just targeted, but it's even personalized. And the flip side is, if you get a message, if you get a mailer or an email, or you hear about a presentation about an energy efficiency program, and it doesn't seem as though they're speaking to you, then you ignore it, because there's so much noise out there. There's no shot at you saying, well, even though this is for restaurants, and I own a nightclub, even though my energy use might be very similar, it's a program that's for restaurants. And so I'm not going to participate. I'm just going to screen that out, because there's just too much going on in our world to focus in on it. And so there's these different, in order to actually have someone sign up and say, I want those financial incentives to actually do the energy efficiency measures, first they've got to get to the point where they want to have the energy evaluation or the audit or something like that. And if they're not even paying attention, there's just no shot. So there's these multiple levels to go through. And I wanted to have in the slide deck, if people were interested in going back to our in-depth research on how the energy efficiency programs really got more savings. And this is, if you want to get the data and to the interview level, this is the link to get to that research. Interestingly, our key research question on this one was, what are the program designs in all these different areas that will be gaining high savings cost effectively for the utility programs and the third-party administrator programs. And the conclusion that I drew in the small business sector was that they weren't really going to be getting very deep savings, but to get more cost-effective savings from a program administration standpoint, what they needed to do was get a high number of businesses to participate, especially in similar sectors. So if you get a lot of the restaurants or a lot of the convenience stores in a specific geographic area, and you can meet their needs and communicate with them, then your marketing costs are going to be lower, and you'll actually have a cost-effective program, even though the savings per business won't be as deep. We're also currently working on a completely different research project that is yet to be published, specifically about high participation rates in programs. And a lot of my section for that on small business was informed by this research. That was the beginning of it all. So what are those barriers? And this is no definitive statement of what barriers we found to small business participation in energy efficiency programs. But if you look at the research that's out there, this is a pretty good list. And some of these things, I think, would be familiar to many of you. You know, in any energy efficiency measure, there's going to be usually an upfront cost to the business owner. And that can be a barrier, particularly if they have low cash flow or don't have access to capital. And a really important one for small business is return on investment. So if you have their attention, if you've successfully marketed so that they're considering putting themselves into the program, then they may well be thinking, well, here's how much energy I'll save, here's how much that's going to cost, and what's the payback on this? What's the return on investment? And because they're in business, they might be looking at it and saying, well, it's just because it could save some money, there might be something else I could use my money for, and so I'm still not going to do the energy efficiency measures, even with the incentives. And so that's a really important thing to just kind of get in the door. They're not going to say yes. A business person isn't going to say, I want to spend this money unless it's good for their business. So you've got to make the business case. That's one of the upfront barriers. Another thing is just in the area of small businesses, there's so many different types. I mean, a small office has a completely different energy profile than a small manufacturing firm, or a restaurant, or a convenience store, or a gas station. And if the measures that are incentivized, say, a very common thing for small business is energy efficient lighting. So they can get a lot of savings for a small investment by switching to LEDs, especially in retail, where the business owner will get benefits because it may be more attractive lighting. It might actually increase sales if they redo all their lighting. And the utility program, it gets to count a lot of savings because they might be going from incandescents, which might produce a really nice quality of light for a retail space. But that's just one measure. What if the business doesn't use a lot of lighting? How are you going to get them involved? You've got to have measures that can cost effectively save energy for that particular business. And then have your communications set up to actually reach them. So the diversity of businesses is another barrier that comes up. And time, isn't that, I love it. Why did I say that? Is another thing. It's like small business owners are often really hardworking people. I mean, a lot of them aren't just small business investors. They're people who are craftspeople, and they're working long hours to make this thing, to make a living. This is their primary thing to do. And so if they're not familiar with energy efficiency programs or energy efficiency retrofits on their building, there might even be someone who leases a space from a landlord, and it just might seem like complicated and overwhelming and like, I don't have time for this. And so the flip side of that is designing in to make it as easy as possible for the business owners to participate. Another thing that we found is that in some areas and in some business sectors, there's just not a lot of awareness about energy efficiency programs. I remember my own life and career. I was doing small business stuff in the 90s and the aughts for many years. I did grocery stores, and I owned a coffee shop, and I have almost no memory of anything from Focus on Energy coming across my desk, like, ever. I remember once I was working in a low-income housing entity, and we went to, I think, MG&E and Focus and said, well, what can you do for us? And then there was this laborious thing, and it didn't really apply, and we just decided not to do it after all. And so just sort of standing from the perspective of the small business person, it's almost like there are no small business programs. Because whatever the messaging was, it wasn't getting through. And so that awareness that it exists is, and that it's something that I have time for, that I can afford, like, all of those hoops have to be gotten through. And the other thing that's a big barrier is knowledge. People in the energy efficiency industry, we have confidence. It's like you change that incandescent light bulb to an LED, you're going to save X amount of money and X amount of energy over a period of time. And we're pretty certain about that. This is another one Tom mentioned, right? It's like that certainty. It's like it's going to happen. And that isn't common in the entire population. A lot of people are like, well, the utility is promising me these savings, but what if it doesn't happen? Then I've spent all this money and time and effort, and I didn't even meet the small amount of savings goals I thought I was going to make. So there's just having a level of expertise about how reliable energy efficiency measures can be is crucial. And again, just not to go through it all right now, but pointing back to some of our research and our upcoming research is that there are a lot of energy efficiency programs that really have done a great job overcoming these barriers. Especially some of the bigger energy efficiency program administrators in the East Coast, like in Connecticut, the utility programs, and in Massachusetts and New Hampshire and New York, National Grid. They have really phenomenal energy efficiency programs for small businesses, and they've been doing it, some of them, for decades now. And they're getting thousands and thousands of businesses to participate year after year. And one of the reasons for that is their financing that they've got set up. They'll have a combination of financial incentives and a term that's adjustable. So they can go to your business and say, you're going to save this amount of energy, and you're going to pay back the loan that we're going to get set up for you on your electric bill, and you don't have to put any money on up front. So from your point of view, it's like, wow, I just start saving money next month as soon as I get my new lighting installed in my business. That's just so easy. It's like free cash flow. Would you like some free money or not? It just gets so much easier for them in that circumstance. And having the high financial incentives. A lot of small business programs are just direct install. They'll just give you the stuff. Are you willing to accept energy efficiency measures? Like, that just takes the whole money question out of it. It's like, then you get to have a real conversation about, will it really save energy? And how easy is this going to be for me to accept those measures? Much different than, please go out and figure this out and hire people and work with multiple utilities and all the confusion around it. Another feature that's in there, it's really common in the most successful ones, is one-stop shopping. So there will be like a single number to call, a website to go to, and they'll have all the measures. Like the gas utility, the electric utility, they'll have the contractors lined up. You just call them and say, I want to participate in this. I saw that your promotions or your ads, and I got that it's for me and that it can save me money and that it's easy. And then they plug you in and can set up those recommended top solutions right away, the ones that are going to be the most cost effective, and they just do it. And that overcomes the whole barrier of time and knowledge. It's like, just call us and we'll get this going for you. And Another piece that's been really successful is if you look at the best programs for reaching small businesses that have the high participation, is there's some component of personal face-to-face interaction. Southern California Edison was known for these, I think they call them neighborhood sweeps. Well, they just knock on doors and they'll go from one business to the next. And it's a human being coming up and saying, you know, I'm here with Southern California Edison, and this is what we got for you. You know, and then there's like an interactive quality. So it's very personalized. And Center for Energy and Environment still does run a program in Minnesota called One Stop Efficiency Shop. And there's been a bunch of research on how they managed to go from a relatively small lighting-based program to year after year, just thousands and thousands of small businesses, and they really ramped it up. And what they say about their own program is that what made the difference is that they hired energy auditors who had sales skills. It was the interpersonal skills, and rather than having somebody with a great technical background, now you need to have a certain amount of that, but that they would only select those people who were just great at communicating one-on-one with those business owners, so that their, what we call the take rate, the ratio between those that choose to get audits and those that actually install the measures, is much higher because of that ability of someone to listen for what the small business owner really wants and to actually sell them. Like, we have this product, energy efficiency, and we want you to buy it. And so it becomes more, you know, it's sort of funny. Usually you hear it the other way around, is that don't try and sell or convince people, it's marketing. But once you get in the door, then there's a certain amount of customization of what is actually being said. And a lot of business owners just want that certainty. They want the return on investment, and they want it to be easy. But if you hear that from a person who's looking you in the eye, it's a lot more compelling than getting a mailer or seeing a website or something like that. The last thing is, a lot of people don't know very much about energy efficiency at all. And so just training. And a lot of the top programs would offer community workshops and pay people to come to the workshop to explain the program. The flip side of all this, and this example is loosely based on a comment I heard on a webinar. I don't know if anybody's heard of Pulse Energy. And there was a webinar about using marketing data to target marketing for energy efficiency programs. And I want to distinguish targeting from personalization, because targeting is one piece of it. It gets you closer, but it's not quite the same thing. But in this example, they had narrowed it down through the different industrial classification codes, and they had looked at the amount of electricity being used and the amount of gas and the location and the propensity to participate in programs, and I think the punchline is essentially we had some sort of, it was like a brochure or something, or it was a letter, and it said, "Dear Denise, you know, we've got this program that's designed just for barbershops like yours and other haircutting establishments," because that's like the category. And they have lighting and hair dryers and stuff like that, so they use energy a certain way. And it was just like a joke. It was like, this is not relevant to me. We have a salon. This is not a barbershop. And so it just goes right in the trash. I mean, that's the difference between, you know, providing a service and junk mail. Is it relevant? And that's the key to this whole thing. And I just want to wrap up by pointing you back to our research on high participation, which isn't just on small business, and also the frontiers. And those are both available on our website. And to really take those two big pieces into account. You've got to remove the barriers to participating in the program so that people have the business case and they would choose to do it. And then it's got to be about them. You have to say, it's a salon. You can't say barbershop, or else there's no shot of that. Thank you.
So I'm Kathy Kuntz with Cool Choices. Cool Choices is a Wisconsin nonprofit that
aims to inspire people to adopt behaviors that reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. And, you know, does this maybe work? No. My first confession in this is I come to behavior change very naturally. My family would tell you that from the age of 3.5, I was on a quest to change behaviors. And that means that, you know, I'd been in the energy efficiency realm a long time before we started talking about behavior, and I was really excited when we started talking about behavior. But then I got kind of frustrated with some of it because we talked about behavior. We can get this savings from behavior. Like people went out and did behavior. I'm going to go home and do some behavior. You know, when we think about behavior at Cool Choices, we think about a myriad of things that people are doing. And all of those things have a different level of persistence. So really I want to make two arguments today. First, behavior is a category of measures. It's not a measure. We need to stop talking like behavior is a thing. It's a group of things. And each of those things has different savings and persistence implications. And because we've been thinking about this for a while, really trying to think about, well, so how do you unpack persistence here? Our latest thinking on this is this matrix, that in reality, when you think about behaviors, there are things that are habitual to things that are one-time. So washing in cold water is something you would do habitually. Calibrating the brightness of your TV is really a one-time thing. When it's done, it's done. There's also this, in the work we do, we see a very clear kind of seasonal component. Some things people can do any time of year and do consistently year-round. Some things have a seasonal implication to them. Shoveling snow has a seasonal implication when you live in Wisconsin, for example. So when we think about this matrix then, in terms of persistence, you know, this area here, year-round things you can do any time of year and you do them once and the savings persist, are kind of the persistence nirvana. You know, those are the things that you really get good long-term savings from, compared to the stuff down here in this box, which are things so there are times when you should turn on the air conditioner in your car when you're driving, and there are times you should roll down your window to improve your fuel efficiency. In Wisconsin, we only practice that stuff for about 2.5 months, kind of thing. So that sort of, and let me talk through this in a little bit more detail, just give you some examples. So up there in that one-time actions, the kinds of things we promote that fall in this category, things like calibrating electronics, setting your water heater temperature, faucet aerators, getting rid of plug load that you're not using anymore in some way. And really, the persistence is clearest in this category. It's the remaining life of that equipment. And you know, when our colleagues at the Energy Center of Wisconsin have talked to our program participants years after they've participated and asked about some of these things, they asked specifically about the water heater temperature. They said to people, well, you know, what have you done with your water heater temperature since the program ended? And they kind of got these sort of polite pauses, and because we're the Midwest and we don't want to, you know, just tell people we think their questions are dumb. But they were like, well, they told me to do this, it saves energy, it's safer for my family, why would I undo it, kind of thing. That those are things that are one and done. It's just very simple in that category. The one-time seasonal gets more complicated. So some of those things are things like installing a rain barrel, which again in Wisconsin you would only do seasonally. It's not a really good time to install rain barrels right now in our state. But some of the things are like thermostat settings, where frankly I don't think we have enough data yet to know if the thermostat settings we get someone to set this winter, hold for next winter, or when they switch the furnace to heat next year, something happens about that. We just don't have enough experience with some of those behaviors yet in the field where we're really paying attention to them to know for sure what persistence is going to be past the current heating season.
lots of times when we talk about behavior, we're really thinking about these habitual actions. You know, it's the turning off lights, turning off electronics, eating meatless meals, carpooling to work. These are the kinds of things people might do on a daily basis any time of the year. Even in this list, though, I would argue that some things have structural implications that other things don't. If I start carpooling, I'm building a relationship with other people that might influence how persistence works there. Washing in cold water is one of my favorites on this list because I think if you make the transition to washing in cold water, that might mean you're now using a different laundry detergent. You've got sort of these ongoing results. The idea that habitual action like that might stop persisting after a year is very non-intuitive to me. I just can't kind of conceive the day you wake up and you go, okay, the clothes haven't faded, they're clean, I like the new detergent, but we're going to go back to shrinking stuff because that was good. I mean, it just, I just don't get how, so again, it's unpacking this to start making sense of them. Then you've got these seasonal habits, like shoveling snow instead of using the snow blower, line drying clothing, biking to work, which is a seasonal habit in Wisconsin. It's winter. Can you tell I'm bitter about that? I am a little bitter. I think, you know, right now when we make assumptions about these, we assume for the current season. We don't presume that that's going to persist longer. I think there's something to learn here, kind of thing. So that's sort of the way we think about this. The question is, when you think about it that way, where do you end up on persistence? How does that all come together? So what we do at Cool Choices is we play employee engagement games. We go into companies and we implement a game where people tell us over a course of a game what they're doing to reduce emissions in their personal lives. And it's an online game that's mostly about, so it runs for 8 weeks. The emphasis is on people's personal lives. We know when they report things to us if they're new habits they've adopted or if they were things they were doing before the game. And the system's transparent, so all of their colleagues know what they're reporting in a way that increases honesty. And it's this kind of social fun thing. So I took data from a number of our games in a variety of sectors to look at this question of persistence. About 2,600 participants are in the data set I played with here in a variety of sectors, kind of thing, and tried to go, okay, so across those folks, what do we see in some of these very specific measures? Just to give you a sort of a flavor for what's maybe out there. My first example is adjusting the water heater temperature. Our assumption is that if it's a natural gas water heater, they're saving 15 therms a year by making that adjustment from typically 140 to 120 degrees, kind of thing. We assume that, so a water heater has a 15-year life. Our most logical assumption is we're going to get half of that, that some people have a new water heater, some people have an old water heater. And across that cohort, about 17% of the players reported that they did this as part of the game and it was something they'd not done before the game. So if you look at the annual savings for that 17%, that's 6,700 therms. But if you add in the persistence piece, you're talking about lifetime savings of 50,000 therms. So there's a pretty dramatic difference there. That's a measure that has a pretty dramatic difference. Another measure in that category, calibrating the flat panel TV, so essentially changing the brightness so it's set for your home, not Best Buy like it came from the factory, has a much shorter lifespan, televisions, our persistence assumption here. So the difference between annual and lifetime savings is smaller. There's still some difference there. Look at another category, installing a rain barrel. So in some of these categories, I have to say it gets much more interesting. You know, when we talk about electric and natural gas measures, there's a really good data set of assumptions nationally about what those things save. As we move into some of the other measures we care about, the data is a little sketchier. So actually, the EPA says you can save up to 1,300 gallons a year by having a rain barrel. And when we looked at that data, we went, yeah, 650 seems like a number that is a little bit more realistic. We're presuming 5 years of persistence here. A rain barrel would last a lot longer than that, but there's probably changeover in home ownership that comes into play here. So again, and we're trying to think through how do those pieces come together. 1% of our players reported this. Now, part of our challenge is we run 8-week games. Some people played games at a time they couldn't possibly do a rain barrel kind of thing. But again, a dramatic difference in annual versus lifetime savings of that measure when you're just thinking about this in a kind of annual way. So then let's talk about habits. This is my favorite habit that we promote, not speeding, because it's the habit that most consistently people tell us is impossible. That I tried to do that, I'm having so, and indeed, in the interviews that the Energy Center has done post-game, it's the measure where people confess that they can't maintain it. Based on what the center heard there, our assumption right now is that this persists for 6 months. So instead of presuming annual savings across the people who tried that of 20,000 gallons of gasoline, we think in actuality we achieved something more like 10,000 gallons. This one goes the other way. Everything will not be good news in persistence when we look at it, but a lot of it is. Down in that bottom category, biking to work. So in our bike to work assumptions, we're presuming people are only doing this in good weather. So, you know, the savings are relatively modest. And again, we're presuming it's going to persist for a season right now. We'd like to think that it means they're going to bike to work next summer too, but we don't have enough strong evidence of that yet to know that that's really the case. So just to give you kind of a meta view of that, so if I look at those 2,600 participants and all of the things that they did to save carbon, and I look at the annual carbon savings from their measures, this is what that chart looks like. And the big bulk of things come from habitual actions. But if I look at it at a lifetime level, that flips. And the one-time year-round becomes the dominant piece of the puzzle, which gives us cause to think about how we encourage which things, partly because those things are more persistent. Now, we think that probably there is an attitudinal and kind of future decision-making piece that comes with the habitual stuff. The habitual stuff may build us other benefits. But in terms of core savings, the one-time stuff is looking like where it is. The other way maybe to look at this is, so I looked at the kind of aggregate average persistence across categories, across KWH, therms, water, gasoline, and CO2, to give you a sense of, so across those 2,600 participants, what's the persistence of the likely persistence of their savings in those various ways. And two things I would note here. So on water, there are a number of low-cost things we promote that have considerable longevity. By contrast, on gasoline, there's almost nothing we can encourage people to do short of buying a new vehicle, which we don't encourage because doesn't sort of fit our low-cost, no-cost approach to this, that has staying power. I mean, everything that you can do to save gasoline with the vehicle you have tends to have short persistence. It's more habitual at this point. Now, I've been thinking a lot about how we might add encouraging people to eliminate a car as a low-cost way to do that, and how we could fit that in there. And so we're going to talk more about that measure back at the office. But that's sort of what that looks like. And, you know, fundamentally what I'm arguing for in all of this is that we stop thinking about behavior as a black box, that we start unpacking that box and really understanding what the pieces are so that we can accelerate the savings that come associated with behavior change. And that's it.
I do have one of the lightning round sessions, so you'll hear about sports marketing in 5 minutes or less. I know, it goes quick. WECC helps our clients incorporate sports marketing activities with major and minor league baseball, hockey, football, and soccer teams. We provide education and prompt action and encourage behavioral change with groups like the Minnesota Twins, Colorado Rockies, the Avalanche, the Broncos, but we also have worked with smaller groups like the Chicago Fire and other organizations like farm teams that work really well too. But really when you hear play ball, that means we are in the season that's sounding off sports marketing. We have used a lot of different vehicles for our clients in the past, but what we found to be the most effective is really baseball. And there's a couple of reasons for that, but primarily baseball is really a marketing machine. They have 5 months, which is a terribly long season, and daily promotions. So what this means is they are very experienced at being able to implement programs for different advertisers. And the different advertising options for us are standard advertising announcements, banner ads, parking lot interviews, texts, along with bulb giveaways, which we've done for one of our clients, Excel Energy. On a day for Earth Day last year, we gave away 35,000 different bulbs on the exit of the event, which was a great way for them to promote themselves and incentivize education. One of the pieces in with the package was a lot of social media for us. So we included Facebook posts, 2 separate tweets to 49,000 different fan base emails. We did a homepage talk, which allowed us to talk about CFL and LED giveaways that we were going to be giving away, and also how to effectively include those in their homes. And we had dedicated email blasts to over 300,000 registered Twins baseball fan emails. Now the LED packaging, we wanted to create a game kind of experience and to make sure that they included those bulbs when they got home. So this is for the Rockies. If you turned in your bulb and it turned red, then you won tickets for 12 in a box. If you got your light home and it turned green when you installed it, you got season tickets, which was a great idea. And then if it turned blue, you actually got to throw out the first pitch, which that was 2 very lucky individuals. No color at all, and they were still incentivized because they got to save money on their utility bill. Excuse me, a little bit of a cold. And they also got to do their part in saving the environment. And on the one panel you probably can't see, it's over here, we got to talk about energy saving tips. So we got to promote the event and the bulb giveaway, but we also got to change some behavior and their knowledge on CFL or LED bulbs. And of course, the messaging didn't stop there. We had T-shirts. So it had a funky little slogan, ditch it, switch it, and you win. We also provided some education upon recycling for bulbs because we didn't want them to just throw away their incandescent bulb. And then they did have recycling pieces in the local retailers and follow-up promotion in the push that we did for that campaign. And of course, there were bag inserts and box seat inserts with the same kind of type of theme. For us, we can empty a stadium like the Twins or the Rockies in 2.5 hours. That's getting 35,000 people through 42 different exits with people with the red shirts on several different sides and getting them through. What we did find out is that we have tried this in many different types of venues, and that baseball works best for us because of the inclement weather, and that way you don't have any bulb breakage in the parking lots, because hopefully it's always a sunny day, and if not, it's at least a little bit of rain, but you don't have to deal with the ice. And again, what we found out, we did do an insert into half of the bags that walked away. It was a random survey, and what we found out is that we tried to incentivize. After the first 2 different bulb giveaways, we incentivized the response. So the people who did respond back in had a chance at winning 4 seats behind home plate, which was a big ticket, or they could win $250 at the Twins shop And what we found out from that, 8 out of 10 of the respondents followed up with the survey had installed the bulb in their home. 3/4 of the respondents plan to purchase more CF bulbs in the future after they've received one. And 3 of the 5 respondents did not previously purchase CF bulbs, but they would purchase one in the future. So for us, it's about incorporating the love of the game and also education on CFL and LED. We want them to include that in their product mix, in their purchase, and in their homes. It's a fairly straight-run program for us, but we have tried it in a lot of different types of sporting events: football, baseball, soccer. It is a different target market for each, but it is mass marketing and mass implementation of a bulb program. There are so many different volunteers to pull this off, and 42 different exits. There's these large boxes with our client's logo on the front, and then the red promo sign on the sides. So we don't want them to take the bulbs home and not to forget to screw them in. But it is kind of a machine. It does take 2.5 hours to empty it out, but it is a constant left or right kind of movement going on. And they have the bags listed along their arms. So if you could hold like 20 on each side and then as it goes. But they found that actually people implementing the bulb, because it's based on the red, green, or blue color, then people are taking selfies of themselves in the bulb and sending them into the utility, which is kind of cute.
Hi, I'm Ingo Bench with the Energy Center of Wisconsin, and I'm talking to you about a poster that I'm giving at the BECC conference about a study of residential high users we're currently doing in Minnesota. This is a CARD-funded, Department of Commerce-funded project from the state of Minnesota, and we are investigating what residential households, single-family homes that are on the upper end of either electricity or natural gas usage look like. What's happening in those homes? What are the causes of the high usage? What are the behaviors? And could they be engaged in energy efficiency programs? And are there things that energy efficiency programs can do that meet them where they're at in more targeted ways, because the savings potential, you would think, would be higher. So we have completed the characterization part of the study, which means we looked at billing data from our 4 partner utilities in Minnesota, and then we recruited 100 households that are high users, either electric, natural gas, or both. And we visited them, we did energy audits, we did interviews, and we are at the tail end of analyzing those data. Step 2, which will follow next year, is to work with the utilities in figuring out what that means for energy efficiency programs. Step 3 is to actually test those tweaks to programs tailored for high users to see what actually happens. So I'm just going to give you a couple of tidbits from the characterization study. So high users, what does that mean? We looked at the top 1/5 of users. So in Minnesota, that means 1,200 therms per year of usage, or 12,000 kilowatt hours. So it's a fair bit of usage. And the types of usage that we see in natural gas, you can actually identify when it's just because the house is big. There's nothing else going on, it's just a big house. And that's about 15 to 20% of our natural gas high users. Then we broke the other houses into cases where it's about the equipment in the shell or about behavior. And predominantly it is about either the building structure or it's about the efficiency of the equipment. But we do see cases where behavior, thermostat settings, hot water use, things like that are at play. On the electric side, we only looked at whether it's the appliances or whether it's the behavior, and it tends to be a little bit more appliance efficiency than behavior, but it's a good mix of both. The kinds of opportunities we see, this panel, are very representative of the kinds of things you'd expect in homes. It's typical measures. We're not seeing a lot of really strange uses. But the really good news is that when we talk about efficiency to these folks, they're already engaged with efficiency. It's not a strange concept. It's not something that's odd to them or that they're actually not interested in. 91% of our households talk to us about things they've already done, and for the most part, they're very substantial kinds of activities. They're not just, oh, we try to turn off the lights more. We added insulation. We got Energy Star appliances, things like that. So they're already engaged, which opens up the door to do more. We think they're good opportunities. Furthermore, when we talk to them about what kind of experience they had with their efficiency activities over the past, 78% said positive things. Another 13% said kind of a mix of good and bad came with their efficiency efforts. And the very final thing I want to show you is, you might not be able to see this well here, but when we talked to them about their bills, a slight majority thought their bills were high, but about 40% did not think their bills were high. So they're not really aware that they're high users. Yet, at the same time, they overestimate how much they actually pay. When we compared how much they say their bills are to what they actually are, they overestimate what their out-of-pocket expenses are. So anyway, those are a few of the interesting tidbits from the study. There's a whole lot more depth, and I'm happy to talk to any of you afterwards if you have any questions, or if you're going to be at BECC, come visit the poster. Thank you.